Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great beginning to week 6. Week 6 is nearing the end. This week we're going to have, same format as before, a discussion board and an assignment. Our discussion board this week looks at the implications of health or education on human capital. So what we've noticed with both of these is that the prices of both have gone up dramatically in the last 20-30 years. And then you're supposed to discuss policies that you would recommend to rein in the costs or at least slow down their rate of increase. Sometimes, we want to cut costs, but really we may need to just look at slowing down our increases in our rates. During the week, I'll post some graphs that kind of shows just how quickly both of these have risen. Just to give you a for instance, when I went to Kansas State when I was probably in the early 2000s, late 90s, the cost for our average, credit hour was $62. And now it's, closer to 300. So you can see just in the last 20 years how that has really grown dramatically. I'll give you some actual formal data instead of just my experiences once we get into the discussion board, but that kind of gets you started on some of the things you might see. Let's go through a student post. This one's talking about high educational costs. The issues with these, yes, what the student did was excellent, talks about lower income families. That makes getting a degree even more difficult and out of reach. The sharp tuition costs have accelerated longer term trends of college becoming less affordable and cost shifting from states to students. That's absolutely true. And this is in correlation with the fact that our incomes really haven't grown. They haven't grown for anyone. They're growing, we're getting cost of living raises, but overall, just the dramatic increases that we're seeing in both healthcare and education, we're really not seeing. And then this student does a great job talking about the benefits of having that formal education. You could go a different route. You could talk about how really you're prohibited from entering the market in a number of careers without that education. That's why right now I'm getting my PhD because it has prohibited me from going further into the education area. I was actually a food scientist before I started teaching, so never thought I would actually need a PhD, so I did not get one. And since I've come in, I've seen how it really limits the classes that I'm able to teach. I can't teach any upper level classes, even though I've taken a lot of those. There's just a lot of constraints. And so come up with something that interests you if you choose this question. Here is another student's post. The information that they have here is good, but remember, anytime you use data, you need to cite that. So you should have a citation with the author's last name and the year of publication. If you're going to use information like this, I really do like the data that they used. It's very helpful to see kind of what the average household spends. I think, unfortunately, the number of chronic illnesses has risen dramatically. You could focus on that. Our family specifically sees very significant healthcare costs each year. You could add something personal if you'd like to. Policies. The student recommends universal healthcare. You could discuss other countries where it has been successful, or you could go the other way and say, universal healthcare is just going to make it more expensive and we'll just pay it in our tax dollars. You can go any way you would like. It is up to you, but that's just a couple of examples. Okay, there are 3 parts in the assignment for the week. And so I kind of broke those out a little bit for part A, part B, and part C. So part A, we're going to look at a hypothetical situation where inflation occurs, addressing the situation and how it affects either aggregate demand or aggregate supply. You can think about the circular flow model. Just remember, circular flow is when resources are brought into the market. They're called factors, and they're utilized by a business, and they create a finished product, and those factors are created into final instead of an intermediate, and then they're sold. When the company sells those, they're able to pay their employees a wage. The employees make a wage and are able to spend that wage on goods and services. And so that spending kind of creates the cycle of employment. And so that's why the circular flow is important. Part B, pick a population and describe how inflation impacts this population. You can pick whichever one you want. Typically people picked those that are retired, young families, or working poor, just because those have more dramatic differences as far as being impacted by inflation. Inflation, can also impact the rich if you think about it. If they're investing in things and inflation is going up quite a bit, they can choose not to do so because the inflationary pressures are making their values that they're earning in the market work less. And then they'll want to do something else with their money, maybe put it into gold or things that do not change in value in the same way. What action can society take to minimize the negative impact? What trade-offs does society have? You can come up with anything you'd like. Let's go over a few examples that'll hopefully help you. So one type of demand pull is increased government spending, such as a government stimulus package. The increase in spending can cause an increase in tax flow, and that will increase our demand. Increasing demand can cause higher prices. Higher prices are what is inflation. So, and this is how it can impact some of those. The retirees is what's listed here. They are typically impacted by inflation because they are on low fixed incomes. So this is very important to think about. Okay, this is another thing, another example. We can see this happening through an increase in mortgage rates when we see inflation, lower values of savings, pensions, and other investments. The most common type of demand pull is when aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, resulting in higher prices. Demand pull looks at the demand side. It's anything that affects the price after it has reached the market, such as a federal stimulus. Also, another good idea. Demand pull will pull prices up, increase GDP, decrease unemployment rates. So they're kind of talking about the same thing. This example is really good because it kind of puts it into details of exactly what is happening to those curves. That's why I liked it. Let's see, this one is kind of going over a lot of the same information that we just talked about. I liked this one starting here. It's talking about the rise in home prices. This is something that happens sometimes, and so I thought it would be, kind of an interesting thing for us to discuss. The rise in the home prices creates a positive wealth effect, which increases consumer spending, leading to a rise in economic growth. Even though home prices tend to rise with inflation, individuals with low fixed incomes are faced with higher property taxes, higher insurance, and higher costs for home maintenance. So this is something that you definitely want to think about. We were considering a home that hadn't been sold for a number of years, and the tax rates looked great, and our realtor explained to us that in the area that it was located, the taxes were going to go up from about, if we paid for the house, they would go up from the $5,000 that were listed here to about $14,000 a year. And so if you think about that, that's a mortgage within itself if you're seeing more than $1,000 a month just for property taxes. So I thought that was a really good example on that section. So part B, remember we're picking that population. A lot of times the retired population is just really where you see that. You could also look at those who are working minimum wage jobs, and that's why some feel that raising the minimum wage is so very important, because if you see another percentage rate in inflation and you're already very stretched, that's going to make some things, as even essential things, unaffordable to you as a household. So you could do the working poor. Sorry, I mentioned retired a couple of different times. I'll have to adjust that for next term, but I appreciate you going through this video. And then in part C, we're going to look at monetary policy. The best way that you can look at inflation is to go back to 1979 and look at what Paul Volcker did when he was the chair of the Fed. He raised the Fed funds rate very considerably because there had been inflationary issues for a decade. The policy did reduce the inflation and made a significant impact on their economy. It was rough for a short period of time. And then it just kind of goes over the basics. When interest rates are high, we're going to slow that economy down and lower that inflation. This is just important to think about in society. When you see interest rates, you definitely want to be looking at these before you buy a loan for a house or a car or a business if you're considering a business. I hope this has been helpful. Remember, this paper is a little bit longer. We're going to look at 3 pages. So plan a little more time for it. Use at least 2 sources, APA formatting, title page, intro, conclusion. Remember, I can accept the assignment late unless you have an emergency. The discussion boards are typically not accepted late. I hope you have a great week.